Hello, everybody. Welcome to the channel. My name is Kyle Suggs, and this is the Conservative Take. Today, I'm going to bring on Marty Nalitz from the Marty Chronicles to discuss a little bit of politics. And Marty, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Kyle. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, I'm excited about talking to you about this. Yeah. And thank you for taking time to come on. How are you liking so far being on the Conservative Take and the things that you're doing so far?
I'm enjoying it. The audience is fantastic. It's great to just be a part of that and see the growth and how everything's going. Yeah, I'm loving it. Thank you. I like it a lot.
Well, I really appreciate your input because I think your expertise is something that I just want to kind of just glean off of and take advantage of because you have so much experience. And myself as well, I've been involved in politics for about 20 years, but hands on, hands off. But I like the election cycle because it's just such a exciting time. And right now we're talking about the primaries. And you're in Pennsylvania, is that correct?
Yes.
And you're in Pittsburgh area, correctly, or somewhere in there?
Yeah, I am. I am in the extreme southwest portion of Pennsylvania. I'm 15 miles from West Virginia, 15 miles from Ohio. This is one of the most ultra-conservative areas in America where I'm at. I'm west of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I looked at the map, actually. You have like one county there that's really light blue, but the rest of it is just stone red, especially going towards West Virginia.
Tell people that the area that I live, it is so conservative that businesses in the last election would put Trump signs up in their windows and not think twice about it. This is just a very old school conservative pickup trucks, rifles in the back of the truck, that sort of thing. Really great people, fantastic people.
Sounds like my kind of area I want to live. So that's awesome. And I think Pennsylvania is such a key state, right? I mean, it's especially where you are. You're hubbed up against West Virginia, which is probably one of the most conservative states. If you look at it from a county by county basis, West Virginia and Oklahoma are the only two states in the entire country in two election cycles, 2020. I guess I was at 16, I guess.
Yes.
Every single county in both those states voted for Trump.
Yep.
So, I've looked it up. Every single county, no other place in the country had that going on for them. So let me ask you a question, Marty, before we get into discussion about politics and so forth. Why is the primary so important, and particularly why is Pennsylvania, do you feel, is so important this midterm cycle?
Well, Pennsylvania is important in the sort of the short term and the long term. And by long term, I mean, when you're looking down the road towards a presidential election, this is 20 electoral votes. Pennsylvania is the state that put Donald Trump over the top in 2016. So it's important in that long term. In the short term, Pennsylvania is very, I don't want to use the word bipolar, but very politically bipolar, for lack of a better term. I'll give you an example. We have a governor's race this year. The incumbent is termed out. Now, in the history, since they put in term limits, no term limited governor, his party has never retained the office. So this statistically and from metrics point of view, this is a great opportunity for Republicans to take back the governor's office. The Senate seat that's up for grabs, Senator Pat Toomey, two-term incumbent, is retiring. So that opens the gates on both sides. I mean, Pat Toomey didn't win by a lot in 2016. He won comfortably, but not by a lot. So whichever side of the fence that you're on in Pennsylvania, you look at those two big statewide offices, governor and U.S. Senate, and you say, hey, we can get this one, no matter which side you're on.
And for those people who don't know by now, if you hadn't figured it out in the past 3 years why governor's races are so important, you can look at Minnesota and you can look at states like Florida, but just that's the obvious. But can you explain to the audience why it's so important for Republicans to have the governor's office?
Yeah, it's absolutely necessary in terms of a long-term growth. And I don't mean of a party. I mean of a message. It's absolutely imperative. One of the most dangerous things, in my opinion, that happened in this country was when they took out Governor Scott Walker in Wisconsin in 2018. And of course, the governor in Michigan was term limited, and they replaced him with a Democrat. What happens in those cases is that office controls so much of what's going on. We're just coming out of this pandemic. Pennsylvania is a great case in point. We had in Pennsylvania some of the most draconian lockdown and mandate measures coming from the governor's office. Now, one of the things that happened in Pennsylvania that I don't know happened anywhere else, the Pennsylvania legislature, which is overwhelmingly Republican, put a ballot measure on last May to eliminate the governor. The governor before had almost unfettered power to do whatever he wanted. Well, they ended that. They put on the ballot and passed overwhelmingly that the governor henceforth has 7 days to say this is what's going on, and then he has to go to the legislature to get anything else. So whether it's the pandemic mandates and things like that, whether it's election stuff and all kinds of things, that all goes through the governor's office. And the governor, let's look at Florida. Who's not a huge fan of Ron DeSantis, but he dictates the narrative in every case, whether it is redistricting, whether it's the stuff with Disney. He controls the narrative, and that's true. That's why the governor's office, that's the executive office. That is the equivalent of the president, and that's who he controls the narrative. He or she controls the narrative.
So would it be fair to say that the governor race of your state has more control on your everyday life than, let's say, your senator or even your local congressman?
Without a doubt. Yes, without a doubt. That is definitely true. Not necessarily the ability to make policy, not necessarily that, but the ability to drive the narrative. To say, this is what we're doing in our schools. This is what we're doing with this pandemic. The governor's office controls that narrative. And if an executive branch of the government, I forget whoever's in the presidency, if that office of the presidency oversteps their boundaries and interferes in that state, the governor is your first line of defense. The governor is the person that steps in and says, no, you don't do that in this state. You don't have the authority to do that. So it's an incredibly important place.
Wow. So I'm glad you made that distinction there. So because my audience here, we don't talk about elections every day. So I want to at least kind of just talk at a high level, so people who are just coming on board, who have a curious nature about what's going on. And then maybe if we do this and people like it, maybe we can do other states, but we're going to kind of focus on Pennsylvania because, I kind of want to start off, since we're at the governor's race, I'm going to go to the screen right here. And this is going to be the actual, how about on the screen here? Let me jump over here. And I'm sorry, let's go to the screen. And so what I have on the screen here, if you can see that or not, is the 2022 Pennsylvania governor's race. Sounds like you guys do your governorships on the midterm cycle year. It sounds like.
Yes.
Which is interesting. Is that? Let me ask you a question there. Does that do you a disservice in terms of the top of the ticket being the Republican, or is it indifferent in terms of what you're saying?
I think it's indifferent, but I also think it has the potential to add excitement to the race. You know what I mean? Because it is that off presidential year, and every fourth or every sixth year, you won't have a U.S. Senate race either. So it's kind of, if you are an elections groupie, if you enjoy elections and everything around them, it is good. It is good in that way, because, some people get tired of it. Believe me, I know that. Sometimes you get tired of it. I personally think there are too many elections in America. I think a lot of the statewide races that go on, I don't think they should. I'll give you an example. I think that when the governor wins, the governor should appoint the attorney general, treasurer, secretary of state. In most states, they're elected. I don't think that's a good idea. I think the governor should appoint them, but that's neither here nor there. I do think it's a very good thing if you enjoy elections. If you don't, it's absolute misery. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah, I can speak to North Carolina. I have a lot of experience in North Carolina. And North Carolina, they have something called the Council of State.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's the governor. He doesn't have any. Well, he has power, but he doesn't have the power to appoint. And so the Attorney General, all the secretaries,
Right.
All of the there's like 12 of them, right? And they're all elected. And so Mark Robinson, a good friend of mine, actually, because he's from Greensboro. I was in Greensboro with the school at A&T Greensboro. And back then, there were only 4 black conservatives in Greensboro. And it was me, Mark Robinson, and 2 others. And so now he's the Attorney General now. And maybe we can do a video on that, because I think one day he will become whatever he wants to be.
I'm a big fan. I totally agree with you. Yes.
I mean, he's the real deal, and I have a lot to say about him, but he could be anything he wants to be.
Yeah,
I'll leave it at that. So, but anyway, Council of State. So I agree with you. I think the executive should have the ability, I think, to appoint whomever he chooses, and if they want to have a check and balance against it, have it go against the state legislation to verify, like you would in Congress. I don't know why they don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but that's one of the advantages of having the states having the autonomy to do what they want. That's the beauty of this country, actually. So, with that being said, and since we got that kind of on there, let's kind of dive a little bit into the governor's race. But I do want to get into the Oz and the Barnette, and there's another person that you mentioned too in the pre discussion. What's going on there? But I kind of want to save that to later. But just to get into this, let's talk about Mastriano. Okay. Yeah. I mean, because I know about him only because after the election, I can't say what I want to say. He was one of the few champions, I thought, who's actually trying to do something, to do his plenary authority to actually bring, the whole, state legislation being their primary duty to authorize elections. So what's his story, and what's he been doing for the past 2 years or a year and a half or whatever? And what's the story with him running for governor now? It looks like he has this strong lead now amongst the other candidates who are running against him.
Doug Mastriano is he's a great story. He's been a state senator since 2019. And some of the things I talked about a minute ago, where the state legislature here in Pennsylvania kind of took a lot of the authority away from the governor during the pandemic, Doug Mastriano led that. He was heavily involved with that. Before he even got into the legislature, it's just a great story. I mean, he was a colonel in the Army. The man has 4 different graduate degrees. Wow. He's a great story. He's been running against COVID mandates. And, you touched on it just a minute ago, election integrity. He is in the governor's race, in my opinion. He's positioned as the most conservative of the Republicans running. Now, that said, of course, a lot of people are pointing at him saying, well, he can't win. He can't win a general election. That remains to be seen. So he has positioned himself as the most conservative all the way around. He's pro-life, all these different things. He has endorsed Kathy Barnette, who you mentioned, and we'll talk about in just a few minutes. In my opinion, he's got the background, he's got the intellect for sure, and he's got the drive and the passion, it seems to me. What's surprising, Donald Trump, at least to my knowledge at this moment, has not come out and endorsed anyone in that race. To me, Doug Mastriano I would have thought he would endorse him, but that has not happened. Maybe it will at some point, but it hasn't happened yet. So anyway, Doug, just a great candidate, in my opinion. Good family man, good everything, in my opinion.
Well, he's got a very sound lead here. Right now, I'm on Real Clear Politics, and just so you guys know, it's an aggregate site, sort of like a Rotten Tomatoes for movies, but for politics. And so, but it looks like, I mean, even the outliers here, I mean, it's like the outliers +8. So it's like, from a political standpoint, this is as about as a shoo-in as you can get from a primary standpoint. So
I think you're right. I mean, they keep talking about a couple of others. Lou Barletta, he ran for U.S. Senate in 2018. former congressman. He's in the discussion. I don't see him going anywhere. William McSwain. He's the guy. He's the former U.S. attorney from over near Philadelphia. And Donald Trump has flat out said, I wouldn't endorse this guy if you put a gun to my head. So,
wow.
Yeah. So he hasn't made an endorsement, but he's made it clear who he will not support. So I think those two, I still see commercials for those two guys. But it seems to me, and the primary is on the 17th. That's just around the corner.
Yep. And
it seems to me that it would be Doug Mastriano. That's what it seems to me.
Okay, let's stay with him a little bit. While now him being a colonel, that is not nothing to shake a stick at.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, a colonel essentially you run a base, right? I mean, I think a colonel. I think of A Few Good Men. That was Jack Nicholson, right? He ran Guantanamo. It was like, so he's a big deal, right?
Right.
Wow, that's impressive. I like him from what I heard from him. He worked extremely hard after the election, and I think you're in good shape there. Now let's talk general election, because I hear you said Pat Toomey's. No, I'm sorry, that's the senator, right?
Yes.
All right. So the governor right now. Who's the governor right now of
Tom Wolf?
Tom Wolf. Okay, let's talk about him and what's his position and how far left, because he's obviously a Democrat. So how far
he's
left?
Pretty far left.
Okay.
He's pretty far left, but I got to tell you, he's been this entire year. He's been invisible. He has not been anywhere since they took away the authority that he had. On those mandates, he's disappeared. And what's happened? Josh Shapiro, who's the Attorney General, he is going to be the Democratic nominee. He's ultra far left. And so whether by design or not, Governor Wolf, it seems to me, has really sort of turned things over to Josh Shapiro at this point. So Governor Wolf, he's always run as a centrist, but you got to do that in Pennsylvania. I don't think he has been, but as I said, he's been invisible this entire year, ever since they took away his authority for the mandates.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I follow a channel called Red Eagle Politics. And he mentioned to me that that we should root for the most liberal candidate for the Democrats for governor, because they'll never win.
Of course. Yes, that's very true. The problem, and you also know, I spent a long time in Colorado. Same thing there. Democrats don't ever run as far left. They always run as centrist. They talked for years in the Republican primary. And I think Richard Nixon was the one who really sort of instigated this: run to the right in the primary, run to the center in the general election. Well, in recent years for Democrats, it's been run far left in the primary, come back a little bit in the general election, because you always have people in the media that are going to describe you as a centrist or a common sense person, that sort of thing. So you see that, but it's absolutely true. You can't win in America running far left, except maybe in San Francisco, and a few other places. There are pockets. Governor of New York, governor of California, you can do it there. But generally speaking, certainly a state like Pennsylvania, you cannot do that. You just can't do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I'm bringing up the generic ballot for Congress, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I was looking at this ballot here, or this and you see here, and what this is, everybody, is the generic ballot essentially is, regardless, people are polled saying if you would vote for a congressional candidate, regardless of their party, regardless of the actual candidate or the actual position, dog catcher, chairman of the board, whatever, would you vote for a Republican or a Democrat? It's just either or. And so, right. And this is what we saw early on here. This is about back in 2021. And we see here, as we get closer, this is when Biden's numbers were really getting bad. But now we're seeing a trend upward now. Yeah. And we're getting closer, where it's still very good for Republicans, because anytime the Republicans are leading, even tied, generic ballot is incredibly huge for us, but it's coming closer. Is that because they're trying to be more moderate now, or what's going on there, do you think, in the climate now that's changing to have people coming and looking at Democrats as being more centrist?
Of course, I think that's a huge part of it. Again, let's use Pennsylvania. There are, I believe, close to 1 million hunters in Pennsylvania. It's just huge. Pennsylvania, Kyle, a lot of people don't realize this, but the name Pennsylvania literally means Penn's woods. Sylvania means woods. So it was William Penn that was kind of the founder of Pennsylvania. And it was named Pennsylvania because it was all woods. So it's an incredible place for hunting. And you are never going to win an election in Pennsylvania suggesting that, you want to register guns or you want to do anything with firearms. So you can't say that. I'm not saying you won't do it once you get in office, but you cannot say that. The guy that's running for Senate, probably for the Democrats, Connor Lamb, he ran as that reasonable Democrat, not about taking away Second Amendment rights. And as soon as he won, he was out marching in gun grabbing parades. So you can't run that way for sure. There's no question.
Wow. Yeah. You mentioned Richard Nixon, how he captured the Sun Belt. Basically, he stayed away from a lot of those weird areas that were embedded with the traditional Democrat states, like the Alabamas and Mississippi's. He went around the Pensacola areas, Louisiana, and he kind of skirted across and captured that Sun Belt, which is a more moderate area. I think that speaks to what you were saying in terms of his strategy, in terms of winning elections. And Nixon did a very good job, actually.
Nixon did a great, yeah.
I think it was the best. I think it's the best ever. I think, actually. If I think he or Reagan, I'm not sure which one was actually slightly better. I think Nixon actually topped him in terms of his, his breadth of support. So,
but you know what, Kyle? Just to sort of piggyback on something you just said a minute ago, when he did that in his second victory in 1972 against who did he run against? McGovern. McGovern was that Democrat that said, "I'm going to raise your taxes. I'm going to do that." McGovern, and then later Walter Mondale ran to the far left, and you see what happened. You see what happened to both of them.
Wow, yeah, that's another topic of another discussion. You can talk about that too, in terms of just the political map and how all that plays into it. It's really, politics is very, very fascinating. So cool. So let's talk about the race I want to talk about, and that's going to be the Senate race, I believe. And let me jump this here, if I can bring it up on the screen here. I'm not sure if you can see it or not. But this is the Senate race here. And let's talk about who is the incumbent and who are the primary candidates that are running in the Pennsylvania Senate.
Well, again, that's Pat Toomey is the incumbent there. He's retiring.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Connor Lamb is, I know he's not the only one in the race, but
John Fetterman.
I think it's going to be Connor Lamb.
Okay.
He's a good politician. Connor Lamb has a good story. I'm a Marine. That's been his thing. What people don't realize, Connor Lamb was an attorney in the Marines. You mentioned a few good men a minute ago. Yeah. He was Kevin Bacon. That's who Connor Lamb was. But he doesn't tell you that. He's send in the Marines. When you can't get a job done, send in the Marines. So I think he's going to be the Democrat. I'm as positive of that as I can be.
So here's the question I have for you. And I want to be sure that because the Senate is so important this time around. And sure. I think right now it's essentially tied. I think the Republicans, we lose because you have Bernie Sanders, who's basically a Democrat. And then you have, of course, the vice president, who is, going to break in kind of tie. Right. But right now, it looks like the Republicans could pick up, at best, by my count, four, and Pennsylvania will be critical in doing that.
And there's no question. Yeah, there's no question about that. And, you mentioned this a few minutes ago. Donald Trump endorsed Dr. Oz. And the only rationale I can think of in him doing that, the reason that he might have done that, is that he would view Dr. Oz as a rock star, the name. And that's going to overcome, because Connor Lamb is a great politician. And I mean, he's a great campaigner. He is a great politician. He tells a good story, and he has a good story around him. So the only thing I can think of is that he endorses Oz on the grounds, that he's a rock star, and it's going to be name recognition. And I think you and I are on the same page here. What I know of Dr. Oz politically, he's not my kind of guy, not in any way, shape, or form. Now, that said, when Donald Trump was first talking about running, look, we all thought he's this New York liberal, and he's, who knows what he's going to do. And he was, to me as a conservative, he overperformed, what I expected of him. So maybe, I don't pretend to know the inner workings with Dr. Oz. The other part of it is, and again, you and I talked about this before, if you want to have a majority in, let's say, the Senate, you're going to have some Murkowskis, you're going to have some Collins, you're going to have some Romneys, maybe an Oz. You won't find 50 Rand Pauls. You won't. It's not going to happen. So maybe that has something to do with it too. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because there's a lot of controversy there's a lot of I wouldn't say a split with the Republicans, but there's a lot of conservatives who don't want to say anything negative about President Trump.
Right.
I'm one of those, and I'll tell you why. Because I make no apologies. I stand by him with almost anything because I'm so angry at what they did to him. I pretty much give him a pass on just about anything, right? And I recognize my frailty there, right?
Right.
And then at the end of the day, I want a candidate, whether he endorses him or not. I don't want to, I want a candidate that's going to do the best. But when it comes down to it, I'm going to defend him because I'm so angry at what they did to him for the past 8 years. That being said, that's my own personal hang up. Okay. However, that being said, this person here, Kathy Barnette, and I'll get back to Oz in a second here. I want to talk to him too. Kathy Barnette, who is this lady?
I'm going to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm a fanboy when it comes to Kathy Barnette. I think if you know anything about her, forget politics for a second. Her story, her mother was raped when she was 11 years old and chose to have Kathy, the woman we know as Kathy Barnette. She is another veteran. She has worked in corporate finance. She's a homeschool mother. It's not just, you can talk about that resume, and Kathy Barnette has that, but she brings so much more to it. She brings a passion, and in a way, she brings a passion like Donald Trump. Donald Trump, he was funny sometimes because he'd just get going, get so exasperated. But man, it was the passion, and that's what connected him to people. You'd listen to him and you say, all right, yeah, he's a billionaire and he cares. Kathy Barnette's not a billionaire, but she cares. I mean, or if she doesn't, she's convinced a lot of people of it. She is a tireless campaigner. She doesn't shy away from any questions. Kyle, at this time of the year, especially a week before a primary, there's a lot of strategists and there's a lot of consultants saying to a candidate, don't answer this question or don't answer that. Kathy says, put the microphone in front of me and tell me what you want to know. And that's refreshing. That's really refreshing. She's an incredible candidate, I believe. And for my money, as I've told you, I think Conor Lamb is going to be the Democratic nominee. In my opinion, I'm not saying Oz or McCormick couldn't beat Conor Lamb. In my opinion, Kathy Barnette is the one candidate I believe will certainly beat Conor Lamb, in my opinion.
I think you're right. I think I don't know much about her other than what you told me, but I did see a picture of her where she had this huge gun.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I do. It reminds me of the picture of the one again, I don't remember her name, in Virginia. She won, was it Attorney General there?
Yeah.
It reminds me of her, not just because she's a female and she's black. I mean, but because they don't mind showing that I'm a Second Amendment person, and they don't mind showing me with what I have to express my Second Amendment. So that's why I like that, because in Pennsylvania, it makes sense. You just told me. I didn't realize this, that it's a hunting state, which I sort of gathered. But that to me, that picture might just win her the primary. What do you think?
I agree. And if it's the same picture I'm thinking of, it was in her reserve days. She was wearing a uniform. Was that the one?
I believe so, but it was a huge. I mean, I'm not a weapons.
Absolutely. The reason I'm bringing that up, I am a nitpicker. And when I look at that picture, the first thing I look at is her finger is not on the trigger. Because you see so many people that don't know anything about guns and they pose with them and they always have their finger on the trigger. And one of the first things you're taught is that finger doesn't go on the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Exactly. So that's the first thing I thought of when I looked at it. Hey, this woman isn't just pro-Second Amendment. She knows how to handle a gun. I mean, she's military, so of course she does. But yeah, it's a great picture. I'm assuming it's the same one.
Yeah, it's that picture that's powerful. But then she had two clips. I wish I had them queued up. I don't here. Maybe I'll put them in there after we edit this. But there's two clips which she talks about. One you mentioned about her, her mother not aborting her, and that's just a horrible, just that whole thing was just horrible.
Yeah.
But the second thing was her actually calling out these three guys here, Bartos and McCormick and Oz, and calling them globalists right there in their faces and asking them to defend themselves. And I'm like, shit, this chick, man. I mean, how can you not like this person?
She's fearless. She is fearless. Kyle, again, I go back to my time in Colorado and involved in a lot of conservative, issues and things like that. And the thing that blew me away from the time I first got into it was really the fearlessness of the women that were involved with it, And so as a guy, you'd be like, man, I got to step up my game here, because, these women, and Kathy Barnette is just like that, and if you go again through her history, where she got her start kind of in politics was, guess what? School board. She was furious with what was happening to her kids in school. So that's where she first, dug in her heels and went after it.
Yeah, and this right now, there's no way I can endorse an Oz. And what I was when Trump first endorsed him, I'm like, okay, Trump's probably looking long term. He's probably looking at the health of the party. He's looking, look, if I can have a track record where I'm like 55-0 on endorsements, it helps my brand, helps the party overall. Sure. That's what I'm thinking he's going with. But I don't think maybe he just didn't see her coming, because at the time there was nobody. I mean, they were like in the single digits. I don't know if you remember the polling back then. It was like single digits. And it's like it was no one quote unquote viable at the time. But these things have a way of changing rapidly because people don't pay attention until a week or two or a month before the primary. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you. And again, back to Donald Trump. I'm a fan of Donald Trump too. I've told you this. I can show people Facebook posts I had from 2012 saying that Donald Trump was the only Republican who could beat Obama. And, it didn't happen, but so be it. I have no problem with Donald Trump endorsing whoever he does. It doesn't make me think less of him. He has his reasons for doing it. With Dr. Oz, with what I know, maybe he knows something I don't know. Yeah. But, you threw something out there a minute ago that maybe he's looking at the brand of the party. Now, seriously speaking, what is a better branding for the party? Kathy Barnette and the optics that go, forget beliefs, the optics that go along with that, or Dr. Oz, who, maybe he's a great surgeon and all those. I don't know anything at all about him, so I don't really want to talk him down. It's not so much I dislike him as I'm excited by Kathy.
Yeah, I am too. But there's another person we talked about discussion here in the green room, and I guess it was Dave McCormick. Can you talk about him a little bit?
He's another one, with a great story. He served in the Gulf War. He is the CEO of an investment company. He graduated from West Point. And one of the great blessings of my life, Kyle, back in the 80s, I got to spend time at West Point with a friend of mine helping train the West Point karate team. So I spend a lot of time there. It's an incredible place. And for anybody to be a part of that and to come through there, you certainly got my respect. There's a lot of good stuff about Dave McCormick. There really is. He's got some endorsements coming up here as well. Sean Parnell, who was the front runner for the Republican nomination, he dropped out and President Trump had endorsed him. He dropped out after some nastiness in a divorce hearing he was going through. So Sean Parnell and Ted Cruz are sponsoring an event for Dave McCormick. And there's a lot of good stuff about Dave McCormick. Again, I see his ads all the time. I see Dave McCormick's ads on TV all the time. And, it's an ad. So they're only putting their best foot forward. There's a lot of good stuff to say about that guy. Again, I say the same thing with Dave as with Dr. Oz. I'm at this point, it's not the lesser of the evils I'm looking for. I believe that Kathy Barnette, and it has nothing to do with her gender, her pigmentation, or anything. Kathy Barnette, to me, is the future of conservatism. Forget the Republican Party. She's the future of conservatism, her beliefs, her passion, and things like that. Again, it doesn't matter to me, how much pigment she has, what her gender is. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying her drive, her passion, what she stands for, what she stood for, her story. That's the future of conservatism. Dave McCormick seems like a really good guy. And, if he were to somehow win this, then I'll sure look long and hard at him. Same with Dr. Oz. I don't know anything about him other than what I read and what his opponents say about him. So that may be true, that may not be true. At this moment, again, I'm more excited by Kathy Barnette than I am by the other people in the race.
Yeah, I agree with you. And for me, I have to just full disclosure here. Part of me says, I want the most qualified candidate, who's going to be the most conservative candidate. If it's doesn't matter what color they are or whatever. Fundamentally, that's ultimately what I care about. But the other side of it is because this is a personal thing. This is my own personal hang up. Because I look the way I do, I want more representation just to stick it to the Democrats, man.
I get it.
Because I hear it so much all the time that I get, you're this, you're that, you're this, or you're doing this. And I think it just kills their narrative, right? It just, if I hate to even say this because it's so disgusting because the Democrats have put us in this class warfare scenario. But it's just so refreshing to see a different look that they can't come at us with that nonsense as easily. So, that's kind of where I am, Marty, and I hate to even admit that.
No, I understand it. And it's not, of course, they're still going to come at you, but in Kathy Barnette, you have someone who not only has the willingness, but the ability to stand toe to toe and say, take your best shot. Now listen to what I'm going to say. So, that's exciting. Again, Kyle, as I said, I don't really know anything about Dr. Oz. I don't really know much about David McCormick. And if either of them wins, I'll look long and hard at them because, like I said, if you want a majority, they're not all going to be Rand Paul. They're not.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit because I kind of want to talk a little bit about. I know we've been going here for about 38 minutes. I do kind of want to talk about Oz because not just him as general, but these potential RINOs. Okay, I guess that's Alaska Senator McCroskey, and then you have who's up in who's the other one? Thank you, Susan Collins. Thank you, and then of course we have people like who's borderline RINO, who depends on what the issue is. Lindsey Graham.
Right.
And I have my own opinion on this. And I think it's the same as yours, but I want to hear from you. Why do you think is it important to have it? We have a few of these people who, like you said before in your video, you were clear, they can't lead the policy, they can't lead the agenda. But why is it important to have these people in your party? Do you think it's because it's a necessity or just because you can't not have it?
I think it's both. I think you can't not have them. Again, use, Murkowski, Collins, Romney, Graham. You can't have a majority without a handful of people like that. You just can't. At the same time, what we don't want to do as conservatives, we don't want to say, hey, you know what, the heck with you. we're not having anything to do with you. You really, it's important that we try to bring the debate, the narrative back to what is best for America and what is best for all Americans. And you and I are convinced that what we follow, the conservative values that we follow, we're convinced. And we have evidence, I believe, to point that out, that personal responsibility, freedom, liberty, those type of things, less government intrusion, they are beneficial to mankind. On the other hand, more government overreach, more taxation, they never lead to anything good. They just don't. Kyle, I'll tell you something, again, going back to when I was in Colorado, that I learned a long time ago. When you talk about RINOS, for those who don't know, it's Republican in name only. We call them RINOS. I am convinced of this, and I've really never seen it fail, that if you elect a RINO to office, they're going to be followed by a more liberal Democrat every time. They're just going to, the first George Bush, who, I don't care how he ran, he's a liberal, the elder Bush. And what happens after him? You get Jimmy Carter. And, it's always going to happen, in my experience. That always happens. And in Colorado, I moved to Colorado in 1986. And when I moved there, Kyle, it was viewed as Little Texas. It was just like Texas. Dallas was called Big D, Denver was Little D. And it was a very conservative state. Over the years, it changed to California East. And a lot of that had to do with the number of RINOs that got elected. And they always got elected saying, well, a conservative can't win here. And the problem is the debate changes. And again, when I keep coming back to Kathy Barnette, what impresses me about her is her ability to connect with people and say, look, this is why it's worked for me. And this is why I believe it'll work for you. And I think she makes that connection. That's not all politicians can do that. That's a gift. And not all can do that, whether on the local level, national level, not all can do that.
And if we look at the election in 2020, other than the presidency, the Republicans did exceedingly well. And if you especially look at in terms of the internals, Black females, President Trump doubled his support with Black females. Yeah. Incredible. And no one wants to talk about that. And the Black female is the most loyal demographic in the Democrat Party.
For sure.
And that's why I just say, we got to get her in, man, because, I know it's superficial and it's my own hang up, whatever. But dude, I'm telling you right now, man, if we get more people like her in there, it's going to open the floodgates open to give more opportunities, because really, the Republican Party is the Black Party. Not sorry to say, but that is what it is. The Republican Party was essentially blacks. At the very beginning. It's time to come home to that and bring it back to the Liberty Party of what it was. It's a party. Sure. It's a party. It's a party to liberate, human rights. It was bent on human rights and abolition. And so, I just think with her coming on, it's awesome. And just to your point about the RINOs, so let me get back to that point again. You mentioned that if you have a RINO, what follows behind that person is a more liberal Democrat. Is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay. Well, then in that case, there's no need to ever get a RINO in office, if that's the case. Because
that's right. Yeah. Unless you keep electing him or her,
right.
Unless you continually elect them, I guess.
Right. Because I did
There's no surer way to destroy your party's brand than to, like I said, you're going to have some in a big party. You're just going to. But to make that front and center, and if that's what Dr. Oz is, and I don't know that because I don't know him well enough, but if that's what he is, then, at one time in my life, Kyle, I was very clear you're better off electing a liberal Democrat than a liberal Republican. Because when you elect Jimmy Carter, he gets followed up with Ronald Reagan.
And I would have fought you as a diehard Republican about 20 years ago. I campaigned for Bush. That was right after 9/11. Just so you guys don't know, maybe we'll do a talk on this, my background. But I was a Democrat. I voted for Clinton twice, Gore, and all that. And I hated Bush after the election. I thought it was stolen, the whole nine. infuriated. And of course, 9/11 happened. 2 years later, I was the staunchest hardcore Republican you ever want to meet. But I campaigned for W, campaigned for McCain, was cussed out in the middle of the street for having a McCain sticker on my car, campaigned for Romney, and so I've been there, and I would have argued you down and say, no, it's a numbers game. We got to have the people in office. But no, I think as I get older now, I 100% agree with you. We can't have that because right now it's too much at stake, and the party itself, I think, needs to have its own internal upheaval, more or less. So it's not so much as Republican Democrat, but it's more or less conservative and less conservative Republican right now. What do you think about that in terms of the Republican Party, where it stands now in terms of its base versus its establishment, or vice versa?
Yep.
Where do you think where's the party stand right now in terms of its MAGA agenda versus the establishment, McConnell,
Yeah,
agenda?
I mean, that whatever if you want to call it the McConnell or Graham agenda, there's no future in that. There's nobody. The people that are coming up in the ranks that would carry that mantle are all Democrats. So you don't have anybody. The people coming up through the ranks now are Kathy Barnette. Again, Dave McCormick. Everything I know about him is good. He's not a kid, don't get me wrong. But the people coming up through the ranks of the Republican Party now, that if you want to call it the MAGA agenda, it's far more common. And the average person on the street knows what you're talking about. When you say the McConnell agenda, the Graham agenda, whoever, I mean, what is that? Who knows what that is? So again, even from a point of view of branding, it's important to be able to say to people, this is what we stand for. This is why we're good for you. This is why your vote is safe with me.
I think what MAGA to me means, this thought just came to me just now when you talking about this. I think what MAGA means right now is doing what you say you're going to do and not worrying about where you're going to stand on an issue. Because, Lindsey Graham, okay, I met Lindsey Graham once in a campaign rally or whatever. He came to a fundraiser. And, I have a love-hate relationship with him, mostly hate now. But there were moments when Lindsey Graham really comes to bat. There were times when Susan Collins really came to bat when it comes to the confirmation hearings. But you're sitting on the fence wondering with your pins and needles, are they going to vote this way? Right. And I don't want to be that. I mean, we know if you're a MAGA candidate, you're going to vote a certain way, and you can stand by your commitment. I think that, to me, is what's most important, is an understanding that not only do you stand for a certain thing, but you're going to vote that way. Because we hear it all the time. I remember going back to the Tea Party days, and the Tea Party did a fairly decent job, but two things they had a problem with the Tea Party was when they got in office, they didn't understand politics that much, and they really couldn't get reelected, or they went back on what they were supposed to get onto. They got the Congress, they got the little pin, they got the parking spot, they got the lunch pass, and they got these PACs coming in, and it got too good to them, and now they were never any good to us. And it happened cycle after cycle after cycle. And I was so frustrated. So when Trump came along and said, "I don't give a damn," I'm like, dude, you're my guy. I mean,
absolutely.
I was like, finally, this is the person that I have been waiting for the past however long it's been.
Forever.
And,
yeah.
Remember the Warren Beatty movie, Bullworth? Remember that?
Yeah.
Where he basically said what he wanted to say and he got elected?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like in the movies, we would see, I mean, Mr. Smith goes to Washington. For years, we saw these candidates on TV land that would finally say what they want to say and they get elected. But it never happened in real life. And then when Trump came into office, we're like, look, this is the guy we've been waiting for, isn't it? And so that's why I kind of gravitated to him, because I felt he would do what he said he's going to do.
Trump he's the ultimate alpha male, and I mean that in a good way. He's not going to back down from anybody. He's not afraid. He goes ahead with what he wants to do and what he thinks is right. And Kyle, you mentioned Lindsey Graham a minute ago, and, whether you like it or not, whether people like it or not, Donald Trump basically remade the federal judiciary in his 4 years, and he couldn't have done that without Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham was instrumental in
And
doing
McConnell.
that. And McConnell, yeah. Yeah. So again, I'm not fans of either one of them, but again, you're going to have if you want a majority, you're going to have a certain number of people. And Kyle, one last thing on that. I don't want to keep harping on it. When I talk about that, having the majority, just by having the majority, people talk about Dr. Oz. He's going to vote against the Second Amendment. The advantage, and I'm not saying to vote for him, but the advantage is if you have the majority, you'll never find out how he's going to vote, because you can keep a vote like that from ever coming up that you can't do if you're not in a majority.
Yes, so, thank you. And that's what I was saying before, politically speaking, is like it's a numbers game. It's not just that that plus one gives you what votes come to the committee. You get the max, you get the maximum number of people in terms of the in the committees to appoint judges and justices and so forth. And you also can, it's just, you can set the whole agenda. And that's the thing. Right. I mean, parliamentary procedures, you can do kind of stuff under the radar and behind the scenes that can keep your party healthy. So yeah, I definitely get that. So, wow. So, okay, cool. So, I guess what I'm going to talk about now is just, the overall election in general, and we'll kind of wrap it up on that. What do you see the election looking like in terms of a national race from Congress and from the Senate? Do you think the Congress will get the House back, and do you think we will get the Senate back?
Well, let's talk about the House. Historically, it would be stunning if Republicans don't win the House, not just because of the disastrous numbers for Republicans or for Democrats, but historically, that's what happens, in a midterm election to the incumbent party. So if Republicans don't, for some reason, win the House, it would be startling. And we've all seen startling the last few years. But on top of that, the way they've redistricted Florida, I think, as I read, Republicans pick up 4 new seats in Florida because of the way it's redistricted. And they're getting, some in Texas and places like that. So with all that said, to me, it would be stunning if Republicans don't pick it up. Now, what does that mean? Remember, I don't know how far back you remember, in 1994, they won 72 freshman seats. That was unprecedented. So I don't know if it's something like that. I don't. But it would be shocking if Republicans don't come out with a noticeable majority in the House. The question becomes, who's now Speaker of the House? If you have another Paul Ryan, you've wasted the votes. You've just wasted the votes. In the Senate, I say Republicans pick up the Senate. I think Herschel Walker is going to win in Georgia. And you talked about 4 other seats. Again, we've all seen startling in the past few years. I don't see it happening this year. I would be shocked. I don't know how big of a majority in the Senate. I don't. 2, 3, 4, I don't know. But I do think they pick up both houses. I'd be surprised if they didn't. Now, Kyle, at the state level, I think that Republicans are going to increase majorities in all the states where they already hold them and maybe pick up a few more. Because that's where the message is really resonating at the local level. That's where it's resonating. It's, where I go around where I live in Imperial, PA, and you hear people in restaurants talking about stuff. That's where it resonates. So I do think you're going to see more gains in the state legislatures for not just Republicans, but conservatives. That's the easiest place for conservatives to win. School boards. Look how many school boards conservatives have taken over.
Look, Texas, there was a big race down there when I think 10 out of 11 they basically took it over.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm really excited about is the local elections. And I think this past election, with all the shenanigans that happened, is that people got a constitutional, crash course. And I know Larry Schweikowicz, I think that's his name. I follow him on Twitter, and he educated me and a lot of us on the whole thing with the plenary authority of state legislations and the nuances of the laws and how it was. But people understood that state legislators have a huge responsibility when it comes to that sort of thing. And to me personally, I think they abdicated their responsibility to attorney generals, to governors, to to even lieutenant governors. And so it's just, oh my gosh. So we've got to talk off record on this because I was just so frustrating on this. But yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to us extending the state legislations across the country, which ultimately, Democrats hate this. It flips the entire country slowly. You mentioned 94. That was the contract with America. That was the Newt Gingrich.
Yep.
And I was a Democrat then. I hated the Republicans, but I respected Newt Gingrich because he was so brash. I'm like, dude, and I was living in D.C. at the time. I worked on the Hill at the time. And this guy is brash. Yeah. And he came and said, we're doing this. We don't care what you think. I'm like, whoa. I'm not used to Republicans being that bold. But that whole thing that he did was 20 years in the making. When the Reagan generation of the 80s, they recruit those people, that generation of people who couldn't vote for Reagan, were benefiting from that. These Michael Keatons of the world, not Michael Keatons, Family Ties. Alex Keaton, yeah. That generation, yuppies, all that stuff. And that was a generation that put that into play in 94, right after Clinton came in and started doing what he did. So I agree. I think that's what we're going to see now. Is we're going to see a huge shift. And the Democrats know this. They know they're screwed from a demographic standpoint, from a birth rate standpoint, from a cultural standpoint. And I can't say why what their plans are because they're going to, do the dirty thing, right? But they know they're in trouble. And I think what you said here is absolutely true. And I'm excited about the election. I think we will take the House big time. And I think we'll take the Senate too. Maybe 3 seats there, maybe 4. But so do you have anything else to say else? What's going on with the election before we wrap this thing up? No,
I think we've covered just about everything. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it. I can't wait for the follow-up, in a week, 2 weeks, when we see kind of how things play out, not just in Pennsylvania, but everywhere.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So maybe we can talk about North Carolina next. I'm not sure what's going on the primary wise, if that's really that nationwide. Let's take a look at, well, we'll do that in a second, but I think North Carolina may be something we can look at, or maybe look at Florida. And I'll mention Florida real quickly here because I want to give DeSantis some love here. And I think we can see right now of what he's done in Florida. It's basically he did, and more so, he did for Florida what Trump tried to do for America. And
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And it's a microcosm, more or less. And he's giving us the model of how to govern, how to lead, and how to have courage. So I'll give you the last word here, Marty. Last word. How important is it to have courage when it comes to leading as a conservative?
And that is the bottom line. That is the bottom line. I ended one of my broadcasts recently saying we're about to go into a real uncomfortable time. Things are going to get real uncomfortable, and you either stand up to it or we're doomed. We're doomed. Children are doomed, grandchildren, however you want to put it. Courage is what it's all about right now. It's not about flash. It's not about, campaign strategists. It's about courage. That's why, again, going back to some of the campaigns we talked about, that's why it's important to say, this is my message. This is how I arrived at it. This is why I believe it's good for you and for America.
Awesome, man. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Same here.
All right. Good. Well, with that being said, everybody, hope you enjoyed this conversation. We'll do this again, hopefully, if you like it. And this is The Conservative Take. Kyle Suggs for Marty Nalitz. I will see you guys in the next video.